So what I have planned for today, I'd like to hear all of you do some of the talking, right? I'm gonna spend about maybe no more than half an hour talking about ethics related to AI, and then we'll open it up to all of you, making it voluntary for extra credit to come up and do a presentation. Your presentation, we'll plug you into the lectern. I won't record it, and have you get that practice. It's really important to practice public speaking, even if you never, get in front of a podium and speak. Certainly, in an interview, you could think of that as a small scale public speaking event, right? And so the ability to express ideas in a coherent manner, it takes some practice, right? I remember when I was working in industry before I started as a professor at a university. I was thinking, my God, what am I going to say to these folks for the 75 minutes? And I had no, you work with a dozen people, right? And you chat with them in meetings and, social contexts and stuff like that. And it took practice. And so one of the things I'd like you to do is to practice in a supportive environment. So please afford everyone who decides to present the respect and the encouragement that they deserve. But this is not easy, right? If I make it look easy, thank you. But this took a lot of time to build this skill set in order to start to get comfortable. And how you get comfortable, proverbially jump in, the water's fine. You put your big toe in the pool and then just go for it, right? And I promise you over time, it's going to get easier. But in the beginning, anything worth doing, it's going to be a little difficult in the beginning. And you find over the weeks, over the months, over the years, it gets easier and easier as you develop your particular style, something that provides you comfort. Okay? All right. So the administrative stuff, there is no, this is the wrong one. Um, oh yeah, assignment number 6, the last assignment, your presentation. That's today, all right. I forgot today is the 21st. But so to do, I'm going to return your letters to self, right? I kept them locked up in my drawer. And we have, uh, let me pause this. Uh, well, I'll just keep it going. I don't want to. Deepa, you? And then Mario, you had sent me when I printed it out, put it in a letter. Okay. And then we have Lenny. Lenny. All right. Clarence. No. Nelson. Nelson. There we go. Yeah. Jen. Kadeem. There we go. And Melo's not here, so it's Hector. Nord. No. And then why do we have another for Mario? I will leave one myself. Oh.
Get extra credit.
Okay.
I
want to.
All right.
Like it's something
So I hope that when you read this, everything that you hope for, maybe it's different from what you thought it would be, but certainly I hope I've been able to help you satisfy some of those goals, right? Every year on New Year's Eve, I do the same thing and I open it up the following year. Some of things like I'll be a millionaire. No, it didn't happen. But other things happen in ways that I couldn't have imagined. So I thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this. This is my first time teaching in the program. And I hope to learn from this experience to further improve everything that I'm doing. All right. So when I was little, I was fortunate growing up, even though I grew up in Boston, to have some woods nearby. And as kids, we used to go out and we would all grab stuff like hot dogs, deli slices, bread from our parents' house. And we'd go out into the woods and we'd light a fire and we'd have our little campfire. Now, needless to say, everyone says little kids shouldn't play with matches. If you use this tool, fire is a tool, the right way, something special happens. We roasted all sorts of things, peppers, corn, hot dogs, bologna, you name it. We put it at the fire with sticks that we just broke off of the trees. Now, of course, if you do it the wrong way, misuse these tools, you can get some catastrophic things. And so at the time, the kids I hung out with, we ranged in age from someone's little brother who was 5 up through 12, right? So we were young kids. So we would spend the time in the woods, walking around, going to the park, but a lot of special moments playing with fire, right? So you might wonder, gosh, well, isn't that kind of dangerous? Well, it's a tool, and that tool can do great things, just like your language models, just like your AI models. And so, with the ethical considerations, just like cooking with fire, even as a kid. And I learned more when I joined a Boy Scout troop about how fire works. You want to learn how these models work because understanding how they work will help you to use it in a responsible way. And even though it's the tool generating the content, it's you who's ultimately responsible for the works that are produced as a result of your prompting and your interaction sessions with these tools. And so, like playing with fire, so to speak, you want to use it responsibly. And like fire, this idea of never leaving it unattended. It doesn't matter how controlled the fire might be. You don't just walk away because ultimately you're responsible for what happens after the fact. In similar fashion, with your large language model, it's a tool, it's an assistant. You never let it make the decisions. You don't accept what it outputs as law because it can make lots of mistakes, which you've all seen and experienced throughout the course of the semester. You want to make sure, therefore, whatever it outputs, you trust but verify because it can say complete rubbish, but sounds so good saying it. You want to make sure you verify what it outputs because that's representing you. Ultimately, you're responsible for what happens. Like a fire, you want to trust, your surroundings. If you're going to light a fire, oftentimes there are embers that can float up, and those embers can cause secondary fires, especially if the leaves in the trees above are dry, like in the fall. And so you want to be aware of what's going on around you. With large language models, with these AI models, you want to understand the context of what it's telling you because you might have it output something, you post it online, and you end up saying something you never intended to, maybe offending someone or causing controversy or causing a ruckus, so to speak, that you never envisioned would happen. And nowadays, because news travels so quickly through social media and on the internet, once you put it out there, you can never get it back. It's just gone. And how it lives and breathes and changes over time, it can do that in ways that you would have never imagined, inviting all sorts of drama that you never intended to happen. And so ultimately, you're responsible. You're responsible. It is not a suitable answer to say, well, it's the language model, it's Anthropic, Claude, or it's Copilot that generated it. No, you're responsible because you were the one who engineered the prompts that caused it to produce some output, regardless of what the impact, right or wrong, what that output is. And another concern is so-called data leakage. You want to be careful about what information you put out there. If you are an author and you create a novel work, well, if you upload it to Copilot, you've now given that information to Microsoft Copilot. There are language models and AI models that are quote unquote local. Llama is one of them. And by local means that it runs entirely on your computer. Nothing leaves your physical machine. Now, of course, you want to make sure you have a powerful enough computer to run it, but there are some language models that people in various environments use because they don't want their hard-fought information, their sensitive data, and other important data to leave their network. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. So you have to be responsible. And so I have this diagram from the Western Fire Chiefs Association that talks about fire safety. And sort of going back to when I was a kid, around like 8 years old, 9 years old, versus when I was a teenager, I thought back and oh my gosh, it's just by the grace of God that we didn't cause a fire in those woods, right? And so that is to understand what you have and to use it responsibly. Okay. And so you can use AI as you're seeing, and I hope I've been able to impart to you in a small way. You can use these tools for all sorts of things. You can use it for work, like producing a resume. You can use it to analyze data. You upload the data to it and then say, produce me a summary that tells me how this thing in the data impacts that thing. And it'll do it. And through a series of exchanges with the technology, you can arrive upon some pretty sophisticated things. Now, when you use it in everyday life, you want to use it responsibly. For example, you can use AI to help you with a resume. If you're going to use it to help you with a resume, well, after you write your resume, you should probably upload it to Copilot. And then you should upload the link for a description of the job to Copilot and ask it the question, would you hire me for this job based on my resume? And if it says no, ask it, well, why no? Because you're missing this, or you should add that, or you should stress this other thing. And so you can use it for all sorts of things. You can use it to produce content. You can clean up images or restore images or create professional headshots for people. There's lots and lots of things you can use it for that are useful for everyday life. Now, some models are better at some things than others. And I'm not going to sit and compare and contrast, but you should also look up what tools are appropriate for what particular job. Some are better at analyzing images than others. Some are better at producing certain types of videos. Some are better at photorealistic images versus cartoon-like or representative images. So it's not enough just to know how to prompt. You should also try to understand and do some investigation to figure out which tool is right for the job or the task you have. Any questions? No? All right. And so ethically, it's just a tool. Now, certainly I'm a computer scientist, right? So I'm a little biased in that regard. It's just a tool. The tool isn't bad. It's how people choose to use or not use. If you made blue jeans, well, you're not going to sew up pockets because people steal. Well, the pockets didn't steal. It's how people use the tool, right or wrong. And so you want to be fair and honest and remember that you're responsible for the works you produce. So that means, yes, question.
Wouldn't like fact that this tool is so accessible
Hmm.
make it more potentially harmful?
Mm.
There's certain tools that are harmful that it would not, they wouldn't allow public to have at one point in time.
Hmm.
Machine guns weren't accessible.
Sure.
They-
Sure. Hmm. 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 That's a great point. And my counter argument to you is that it still takes someone to misuse the machine gun. In parts of Texas where feral hogs are a big problem, people use machine guns to cull that feral hog population that are devastating farmland. And so, in that regard, you're absolutely right. But the important point is how you use the tool. Now, certainly, as a new technology bursts onto the scene, at the early parts of the existence of the United States, when they crafted certain laws and things like the Second Amendment and stuff like that, they never envisioned flamethrowers, shoulder mounted grenade launchers and machine guns. They never envisioned that. But still, even in spite of how amazing and efficient, right, in a scary way, some of these tools are, it still boils down to the use of it. And so fire, you can use it to cook. You can use it to warm yourself. It's also kind of pleasant, light the room and stuff like that. But from the perspective of arson, well, someone used the tool for something that they perhaps shouldn't have. So you make a great point. Sometimes things are super efficient in ways that people don't envision. And part of the ethical consideration, both for the person that creates the new tool as well as people that use the tool, we're always, as a society, trying to evolve and come up with quote unquote good purposes or useful purposes for something.
But I think that the next situation is kind of unique because it, with AI being in infancy,
Hmm.
there's already conversation about it having infinite possibilities.
Mhm.
We look up more guns in the 1700s.
Yes.
They thought about that.
That's true.
Be thinking about it.
Mhm.
Be mindful
Mhm.
of it being so accessible.
Mhm. And one of the points is whenever a technology is brand new, which AI is, and we can agree on that, they're still trying to hash out the quote unquote right way to do something. Using the Second Amendment analogy, back in like the old Wild West, right? There were more, or it seems like more. I wasn't alive then, but certainly people quote unquote figured out different ways to use it. And then as a society determined, well, maybe these are reasonable guardrails. For example, with AI tools, there are some technologies coming online that are using these tools to do mental health counseling. That's an absolute horrible idea because mental health counseling doesn't understand the nuance that mental health counselors have. And it's very, very specific to one's life experience, right? And so, absolutely, people are going to try. Well, what if we use this to do mental health counseling? And then you probably tried to get product support, right? And if you do it on an online, like on Amazon, you cannot get to a real person unless you have a serious problem, right? So, absolutely, in the early experience with any new tool or technology, society is going to experiment with stuff. And then we're going to converge onto ways of doing things. And over time, sometimes those things will morph, will change. Maybe this is a good use, that's a bad use. We should tweak this, we should not do that. I don't think AI tools should be used for elementary school students or middle school students at all, period. They should learn to do things manually instead of relying on these tools because you need to develop the thinking processes then, right? And so are they in elementary schools and middle schools? Absolutely. And that's an experiment, right? And so that's what happens in the early days is that there are no laws or guardrails or practices in place. So it's literally like the Wild West. Oh, let's use it here. Let's do this. Let's do that. Now, keeping in mind like we saw, these are just big probability engines, right? There's no magic to it. And part of this narrative that's out there about the applications of AI tools, that's just advertising. That's hype, right? Because they want people to start experimenting with it. They want people to start using it. And right now, as computer scientists, we don't have a way to encode this idea of semantics. When I had you close your eyes and then say, imagine this, right? When each person has this different picture in their mind that describes things related to their experience, it's really hard for AI to do this. I'll give you a concrete example. This chair, if growing up, all you saw was this chair, you saw a certain color, a certain style, you see the way the seat is, the lines, how they form, and they come together. Now, you could go outside and see a stone wall and know that you can use it as a chair, only ever having seen examples of this chair. Right now, AI can't do that, right? All it can do is look at relationships. So part of this narrative that you see that AI can do anything is part advertising because they want you to use it and ultimately they want you to pay for subscriptions so that they can monetize it. But you're absolutely right. I would add new tools, people experiment. And the only ones who lose are sort of the casualties from when things go wrong before all of those guardrails can be put in place. Absolutely. Once you ruin a young person's education in kindergarten through middle school, right? You don't get that back. It could take a decade or decades to repair the damage that you've done to that person's education. You're absolutely right. Mhm.
They say the same thing about, the NRA says the same thing about guns. It's not the gun, it's
Mhm.
how people use it.
Mhm.
And you used almost identical language. It's not
Yes.
the tool, it's
Mhm.
how people are using it.
Mhm.
So that's really interesting.
It is.
Just in terms
It
of,
is.
that's a very similar
Mhm.
argument. But then a little bit later,
Mhm.
you obviously are advocating for some restrictions.
Yes. Yes.
Which in some ways contradicts, I think, what
Mhm.
your argument is. So
Mhm.
yes, it's about how we
Yes.
use it, but you also think that there should be restrictions on how we use it.
Yes. And as a society, we,
Help them for children.
yes.
Which is similar to what people say about guns.
Mhm.
That
Mhm.
needs to be, so
Yes. And in some societies where they restrict more heavily firearm access, people are doing knife attacks, right?
Yeah.
And so, is a knife intended for attacking? No, it's for cutting. And so that's why I err on the side of the tool, but then deciding on what those guardrails should be, I think is a wise thing. So it was some great discussion. And so when you deal with AI models, you should treat it no differently from the internet. You wouldn't stand out there with a billboard saying, "This is my stuff," right? You wouldn't do that. Or maybe you would. I don't know. I wouldn't. But nonetheless, this reminds me of during LifeLock. LifeLock is an identity theft protection service. During the early days of LifeLock, the CEO had these commercials where he'd stand out there with his name and social security number printed on the side of a truck. And so the idea of privacy is really, really important. And his whole pitch was use LifeLock because I can put this information out there and still remain safe. Now, of course, the story that happened, the internet moves fast and furious. So someone took his information and was able to use it I forgot what they did with it, but the internet has ways of getting around stuff. And so he became a little bit of a laughingstock for doing this. But this is just to say privacy matters. You wouldn't take your private information, put it on the side of a truck, and put it in the middle of a busy square for anyone to see. Just because you assert your right to privacy, it doesn't mean something nefarious is happening. It means that you're asserting your right to privacy. And just because you can say something, it doesn't mean you should. And when I say something, I mean the works that you produce as a result of your interaction with large language models. Any questions? No? All right. And again, I'll repeat that information, once you release it, it's gone. You can never recover it because people can copy it and share it and copy it and share it many, many times over and over and over again in a few seconds to a few minutes, right? It's that fast. And so one of the things, I remember this cartoon, and it says on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog, right? And it just says that online, you can be whoever you want to be, and no one's going to know any different. And so when you deal with things on the internet, of course, impersonation is real. Don't believe what you see. And that also goes for the outputs from these AI models. You should operate on the default that you don't trust the information until you can corroborate it from other information sources, because this reflects and represents you when you produce it. It's not an excuse to say, well, Copilot produced it. No, well, you produced it. It's just a tool. Okay. And so someone's sitting at their desk, producing something using Copilot. And these days with social media, you pick and name a platform, you can propagate information worldwide in very rapid fashion. And so the news cycle is seconds, it's minutes, right? When war breaks out, within an hour, you see some correspondent in the country where the war is happening reporting live. That's amazing to me. And so this idea of what you produce, it's not so much the dissemination that's very rapid, it's what comes back to you, right? And so you produce something, and then all of a sudden, somebody from someplace you've never heard of contacts you about something you said. So there are consequences for what you produce, and especially the types of things you can produce with these AI models. So you want to be really careful about what you're saying, prompting it to say, how it's prompting it to output. But then you want to verify, do you agree values-wise with the works that you're producing as a result of these outputs that you've prompted from the AI model? That makes sense? So you really want to take that to heart. For example, you do a product review, and maybe that product review is for some new device or a new thing or new service. Well, you might find yourself embroiled in a lawsuit because the manufacturer or the vendor doesn't agree with you. They can literally come after you, right or wrong. If they have the resources to hire a big legal team, you automatically lose whether you're right or wrong. So there are consequences for that. For example, a persona, right? Let's say somebody said, I want to create a persona of a child that does reviews for toys. These days, anybody can create a fake person with video, with audio, and then all of a sudden somebody contacts you because they think you really are a 14-year-old boy, right? And it might just be an underage minor contacting you. So you're responsible for what you put out there. Just because you can do something with the language model, with the AI model, it doesn't mean you should. Because at the end of the day, what are you going to do if somebody who's 14 contacts you thinking that you're a real person? This persona is real. And then politics. This is kind of like a third rail, right? Especially in today's version of it. There's a lot of polarization, and there can often be aggressive backlash in ways you don't envision. There are some people who post things, next thing you know, they're getting death threats online and calls and getting swatted and things like that. Swatted, let's see, where they call the police and impersonate your phone number and tell them that there's something really horrible going on, and they send the SWAT team because they think that something horrible is going on, right? And that happens all the time. So you want to be very careful about the works that you put out there that you can generate with these large language models. So I'm going to show you some AI generated models, and these are kind of, a little bit on the foolish side to illustrate that it's fake. But for a lot of people out there, they're going to see the content that you produce and assume it's real, right? So this, and I have the URL. I sincerely doubt these three people are really doing that in the Oval Office. All right, so I doubt they're really doing that, right? And you'll notice when people produce AI-generated content, video, especially video, oftentimes they'll have a little preamble that says this is AI-generated. You're responsible for doing that because you can easily convince someone out there, and that someone out there from some place you've never heard of, you're not really sure about the emotional or mental state they're going through. And you could find yourself in a fair amount of trouble as a result of that. Here's another one, and when you see them side by side, it's a little bit more obvious about the deepfake if you watch the mouth and how it synchronizes with the audio. But these tools are getting better, and to someone who's not looking for these disparities, you could absolutely generate content like this and deceive someone who's not suspecting.
First, because this demonstration video has been crafted using the Lip Synthesis web application to illustrate just how effortlessly you can manipulate media. With Lip Synthesis, achieving seamless lip synchronization is as simple as 2 clicks. Here's my plan to restore raw.
Okay, and there are tools going back to that big probability table. If you consume enough video and encode the probability of the relationships between things over time, yeah, you can use one of these tools to generate fake video, so-called deep fake. And so, like we said, when you're prompting your AI model, you want to keep it focused. You want to say, I want you to look at the information specifically right here. Well, if you don't, and you leave it more broad, it's going to fill it in for you. It's going to so-called hallucinate. It's just going to choose something that you didn't, that you weren't specific about, wandering in this vast wilderness of the big probability table. And so here's an example. And in this example, there's hallucination, but it took a trained eye to recognize that, but it still caught the attention of the president and the Defense Department.
One of the great ships in the world, the Abraham Lincoln on fire. They showed it on fire. I called the general. I said, General, what's with the Abraham Lincoln? It looks like it's burning down. No, it's not burning down. Not a bullet was ever fired at it. So
He's talking about the USS Abraham Lincoln, the world's largest warship, a US aircraft carrier deployed to the Middle East in mid-February. But this viral clip viewed nearly 4 million times. It's AI generated.
4 million people watched it.
How we can help. So let's look at the runway. So this is a verified image of the carrier with its distinctive runway markings. Now, compare that to the video. The lines are completely different at the end of the runway, and that's a major red flag. Now, this photo that we use to verify.
So it needed a trained eye, contacted a general and said, what's going on? No, that's a fake. That's not how it really looks. But to the untrained eye, you're just going to accept it. And 4 million people viewed this, right? That's a lot of people. And then you don't know to whom or with whom they shared it. So you always want to verify things, especially if you don't have expertise in that particular subject or that particular topic. Because at the end of the day, it will hallucinate. And these days, you don't know what's real and what's fake. And it took somebody who has trained eyes to spot that this was fake. But for the 4 million people who viewed it, probably very few of them realized that it was a fake. Okay. Any questions? So you can imagine somebody posting an incident happened at Clark University, or some celebrity is visiting Clark University at this day, at this time, right? It's very easy to do. And then you could even have that celebrity or that public figure have a video. Hey, join me at Clark University at the Higgins Cafe for an evening of discussion. Be there. Looking forward to it. All of a sudden, people swarm the university and it was a hoax, right? And so, of course, you'd want to call up Clark University, whoever's responsible for events. Is Barack Obama coming to Clark for an evening in Higgins on May 8th? No, he's not. Oh, okay, right? But to the untrained person, they're not going to scrutinize it. And whoever would post such a video, certainly, it'll get back to you. Because eventually a subpoena would be issued to the social media provider. They give up the account name and they track you down in about a day. But this is just to say, you can't trust the content, and people use this tool to produce fake content in order to get clicks, to try to sway opinion, to shape behavior, or just some of them just to cause turmoil in society. So we really want to operate on a default of not trusting things, because this is one of the examples where people use the tool to do things that are not helpful. And so AI in society. Many public and private sectors are turning to AI and its other kind of companion, machine learning, to automate decision-making. And there's a mass scale digitization happening with data from all sorts of domains. Two of the organizations or domains in policing, they're using data, so-called predictive policing, police data systems, and there are companies making millions and millions of dollars selling into police departments, and also real estate. They're using AI models to do all sorts of things like predictions and determining prices. And so I remember when I first came to Clark in fall of 2021, somebody said, "Ooh, it's not safe." I'm like, "What are you talking about? There's nothing wrong with it." So I went on the police data system, and there's the URL for it, sold by a company called City Protect. And they have these push pins geo-registered on the incidents that happen. There's absolutely nothing happening around Clark University about 7 blocks in every single direction. And so I was able to tell this person that's false. And so predictive policing says, I'm going to use this data not to respond to incidents, but to dispatch patrols in places where the data lights up, right? It's not right, but they absolutely use this. Another thing that's happening with AI, it's used for recruitment. So when you submit your resume to a job, more likely than not, it's being put through an AI system. So armed with something like Copilot, you want to do that yourself along with the job description and have it identify things in your resume that might support your employment or might not support your employment, to give you an opportunity with specificity to find out so that you can correct it, right? Why wouldn't you hire me? Why would you hire me? Based on this job description and my resume, help me to redesign my resume to increase my chances, right? Because I promise you, the companies are using that. If you think about it, rather than hiring a team of people to read through 100, 200 plus resumes, they have one person just puts it all in an AI model and they're done, right? So certainly use the tools as well to increase your chances for what you desire.
Other people are having this reaction. Need to be thinking about that policing
Mhm.
is gonna be done through AI.
Mhm.
We can no longer trust images we see in newspapers.
Mhm.
What is that going to do to society?
Mhm.
Um, about jobs, I mean, even thinking about people who've been formerly incarcerated, people sitting here in this room.
Mhm.
If AI is the only one going to decide on resumes,
Mhm.
it's not even so great when there's human intervention.
Mhm.
It's already, but then it's completely hopeless
Mhm.
if it's only going to be determined.
Mhm.
But in all these examples are, I find them terrified about this world
And that's
that we're
why
creating.
in various professions, like the legal profession, why it's going to be important, and they're way behind on technology. Why it's going to be important for them to become conversant with these tools, because once they do that, imagine in a court case, someone's lawyer asking, which AI model did you use? Well, I used this other one and I got this. So there's a flaw in that AI model, right? And so part of it is keeping up with the technology. And sadly, the legal profession is very far behind on the use of technologies. But yeah, it is scary. It is kind of scary because that's where they're going. And the people that use it, they've often been sold promises and the casualties resulting from those mistakes. It takes real time to repair those mistakes. So yeah, it is an issue. Yes.
Back in the day called Minority Report.
Oh, yes.
Decided whether you were guilty or not.
Mm-hmm.
Tom Cruise was in it.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking about Tom Cruise, the last Mission Impossible based off of this.
Mm-hmm.
AI was controlling, deciding everything.
Mm-hmm. And that's not far-fetched based on today, and even not just today. Think 5, 10 years from now, right? Are people just going to trust it? Retail. It's currently used in retail, and what they'll do is watch your shopping behavior, and they want to see if you're actually going to scan things in, or if you're not going to scan things in. And the kind of insidious part about this is that they will let somebody steal stuff and build up in their database the value of things stolen because they want it to get to felony levels, right? Because that's, more beneficial for them, right? So they use it to detect retail behavior. And I know when I go shopping, if you shop at one store like Costco or wherever you shop, right? I'm wearing a shirt that I bought at the store. Are they thinking that, oh shoot. So I'm actually very careful not wearing something or having an item on my person that I bought there. Now, certainly you go to the Apple store, they're looking at you when you first walk into the store. That can I help you is not to really help you, is to check you out. But you have a phone case and you're walking through the store. You bought the phone case at that store just maybe a month or 2 or 6 months ago. My big fear is they're going to see this item that's my own item and think that I stole it.
I just experienced that the other day going to, I went to Target.
Mhm.
And I didn't realize that I had a rag in my back pocket.
Yes.
Why am I being followed?
Hmm.
And I didn't realize it until I got the register. I was
Mhm.
like, I had
Hmm.
rag that I bought.
Yes. Because they recognize the item. That's one of ours. And it might even be on display in the store, but you bought it. And then how many people can prove that they bought it, right? You save the receipt? No, that gets discarded very quickly. And so here, what happens then is they get a picture of the face, and in the back room, they alert the attendant, but the attendant's not saying the AI is wrong. They're just going by the alert from the system. And so you can have somebody maybe detained, questioned, and all of that when they were innocent, right? But they purposefully let that happen to build up to felony levels of theft because it's not worth their while if it's misdemeanor levels of theft. And so that being the case, you identify somebody based on their face. They get alerted that this person shouldn't be in the store, and then they get trespassed and can no longer enter that store. Now, there was a story that happened in Madison Square Garden in New York City. The parent company that owned Madison Square Garden was embroiled in a lawsuit, and there was a law firm that was representing the plaintiff against the parent company. And so they went through and they got pictures of all of the legal staff, the lawyers that worked in that law firm. So fast forward to a hockey game in Madison Square Garden, one of the lawyers was just attending the hockey game. And the security recognized it because of the AI system with the face detection, and they disallowed this person from attending a hockey game, right? And so it's the sharing of this information that is beyond the purposes for which it's intended is one of the abuses of AI, right? Because attending a hockey game has nothing to do with a lawsuit for the parent company. And they did it because they could, right? So you want to be very careful about how your likeness floats out there in the wild, right? And people use AI models, they could impersonate you very easily with a little bit of video, a little bit of audio, and a few pictures, which is pretty scary. And so I like to mess with people sometimes. And whenever I go to Lowe's, I get tired of that camera staring me in the face. So I carry my football cap, and I have my COVID mask, and I put on the mask and put down the cap, and I check out with that. And of course, I'm almost surrounded by people watching me, and I'm just ignoring it, happily doing that because I don't want it to capture my likeness. If they ask me why I'm dressed like that, I'm concerned about cooties and germs. But nonetheless, this is just to say, you don't know what's happening to that data, right? There's a lot of face data. They have the camera sitting there staring at you, getting lots of images of your face in the front, to the side, all sorts of different angles. And I'm pretty sure if someone came along to one of those department stores and said, hey, I'll give you tens of millions of dollars a month to make use of your data, what do you think they're going to say? It's just almost free money for them. So that's just to say, the information that you put out there, you're entitled to your privacy. Certainly they post it, but you agreeing to being imaged is all they need to collect all that data about you. And you don't know how it's being shared and how it's being monetized, ultimately at your expense. And that's where you're not actively doing it, but on things like Instagram, Facebook, and those social media platforms, people are doing the work for them, just putting it up there. How wonderful is that? Now, I said once to somebody for Facebook, you're not their customer, you're their product. They're buying and selling you. They're selling you rather to anybody who comes with a few bucks to gain access to your information. So you want to be careful about the stuff you put out there. And one could choose to create content, real or fake, from an AI model, but you're still responsible for the data that you put out there. But I just wanted to add this use of AI in terms of your likeness and how important it is to control your digital footprint, because that matters. Once the information is out there, you'll never recall it. You'll never be able to control it and get it back. Okay, questions? Any questions? No? All right. And so let's look at faces. When you take pictures of faces, you usually represent in these circles, you can think of a part of the image called a patch. And that image has certain color, certain texture, shapes in it, and stuff like that. Each one of these lines represents a relationship. So from the corner of the eye to the corner of the mouth, there's a certain distance and a certain appearance. If you take together all of these features in some relationship or geometry, that's how you define a face. And so when you describe with a computer what a face looks like, you're looking for relationships between things in this image. Now, of course, this person is cooperative. You know, they're facing the camera, the lighting is really good, Now, let me show you what happens in other situations. So here we have images of people, and you can see the lighting might change, lighting down below, lighting to the left, lighting to the right. Person has a mask, the head is turned, the head is tilted, all sorts of configurations. But I wasn't being truthful to you. This is all the same person, right? In some cases, it looks like a totally different person. And that's just to demonstrate to you, if it's difficult for us, it's going to be difficult for one of these AI models. And so the insidious thing about that is if you're using face information, quote unquote, in the wild, like the image 2 slides ago, they're not going to be sitting there, neutral expression, perfect lighting facing the camera. Their head is going to be turned. The lighting is going to be different. Things are going to be messy because that's what happens in the wild. Now, if the same person can look dramatically different in the wild, well, all of a sudden, someone's going to be detected who shouldn't be detected and perhaps flagged and trespassed from a store, right? And so this is called algorithmic bias. Algorithmic bias has to do with this imperfection, and this imperfection confounds the AI model, and the outcomes as a result are less favorable to individuals of particular groups, right? And that group could be persons of color, could be women, could be all sorts of things. You name it, it's there. And so it has to do with poor data hygiene, right? And that has a specific meaning, which I'm not going to talk about in this class. It'd take a whole semester. But some examples happen to have to do with judicial systems. Take a big city like Philly, the 5th largest city in the country. Philly is very diverse, both people who are citizens as well as immigrants. And like any city, you have the usual things that cities struggle with, right? Now, of course, in a city, because the arrest rate is higher, it's going to change the risk score. And the risk score determines the sentencing. And what ends up happening, if you happen to belong to a demographic that is more populating an urban area, Philly is the 5th largest, that means by definition, your risk score is going to be higher for the same offense, right? And so now we have the risk score impacting sentencing in the judicial system, just resulting from this poor data hygiene. And it's a serious problem. An active area of research in machine learning in my discipline is algorithmic bias, how you remedy these things. But certainly the judicial system is behind, and they absolutely aren't considering having good data. You want that data to be representative equally across different demographics. Another one happens to do with clustering an applicant pool for job recruitment. So if I wanted to hire someone to work at Clark University, okay, I could take all the resumes that current employees have that are employed at Clark have submitted when they applied. Now, if I put all of these in an AI model, well, Clark skews heavily more towards one demographic versus another. So then if a new person applies for a job, if their resume is an outlier, it doesn't match very closely the majority demographic at Clark, it's very likely that person's not going to make it through the AI system when it comes time to interview candidates. And so in the example I give, suppose you're recruiting for an engineering role at a company. And imagine then if most of the engineering staff was male from large, well-known universities. So that means if a female comes along, she's penalized because she doesn't match that male demographic. Moreover, if that female comes along and she's not from one of those big, well-known universities, well, doubly penalized. And so that's poor data hygiene. Instead of clustering from the staff that you have, you should cluster from different cohorts across your spectrum of cohorts that might comprise an organization. Does that make sense? So you want to think of the data you're using, especially think about where the large language model gets its information. They won't tell you, but certainly when you interact with it, you want to shape the data that you have based on a fair representation across different slices of demographics you might be considering. Does that make sense? And so that's how you repair this poor data hygiene. And so with retail theft detection, to give you back the example from the original one, if your personal item resembles something from the store, Yeah, they're going to flag you mistakenly, but the employees sitting there watching the terminal in the security room, they're not going to know that. All they're going to see is this person was flagged. And so you can get a so-called false positive. It says, yep, I have a suspicious person, but that person really, in truth, is not suspicious. So suppose you have a guy with dreadlocks and that's dreads, and you have data, you have 500,000 examples of non-criminal activity and 500,000 examples of criminal activity. And just imagine from that 500,000 examples of criminal activity, let's say at the retail kiosk, it just happens that one person on that group happened to have dreadlocks. So what ends up happening is it says, I'm going to try to cling to something about this person. So what is it going to do? It's going to say dreadlocks because that's the most different thing relative to the rest of the population because only one person among the 500,000 had dreadlocks. That's a very distinguishing feature for that person from images. So then what happens? Someone comes into the store and your system literally hallucinates dreadlocks. If this person has hair that in any way resembles dreadlocks, ooh, criminal. This person gets alerted by the staff and unfairly is trespassed from the store. And so this is an example of poor algorithmic hygiene. Question, yeah.
Could we blame the creator for these hallucinations?
It would take a great team of lawyers with technical expertise. You could, but the average person, unfortunately, doesn't have access to those sort of resources to be able to really make that case. Boston Dynamics, yes.
So let's say they had
Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. 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 Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Ah, one could try to go after the creator of the system, but the creator of the system is going to say, read the customer agreement, page 5, paragraph 2, and it says you have to verify what you're doing. Most of the people who create these things, and you see it with cars that have autonomous driving features, they'll say, this was not intended for you to go to sleep and let the car drive you, even though it can, right? So to answer your question, it's one of those situations where with enough resources, with enough access to resources, you could absolutely go after them, right? But for the average person, they don't have the resources. You could try, but it's really hard.
If they're trying to go after, what is that person thinking about when they're creating these systems?
Unfortunately, the scientists and the engineers don't even give it a thought. They're just creating the system, and oftentimes they don't take pause to consider what the implication is of the stuff that they're creating. In many of an engineering curriculum in school, many of them don't even require ethics courses. And so they're merely creating new technology for the sake of cool new technology without regard to those decisions. An example with like a self-driving car, if the car has to make a decision, there's people in the roadway. It recognizes a child in the street versus somebody older in the street. Who does it hit? The older person or the child? If the decision, okay, if the decision is hit a person in the road or crash into the sidewalk or potentially or to a wall, potentially killing the driver, what decision should you make? Don't know. Now, in the case of hitting the older person versus the child, well, no one wants to hit a child, right? And the thought is that the older person has kind of lived longer and can afford to be sacrificed for the sake of the child. But what if this older person is the governor of Massachusetts, right? Who then? What then? Do you hit the child or do you hit the older person? That's just to say it's a tough call, but it's a real choice that sadly I hope no one ever is put in that position, but a choice has to be made. So then it hits the older person. So then the lawsuit happens. The family goes after the company. Grandpa got killed. Your car is dangerous, and grandpa is no longer with us. So the grandkids can't go fishing with grandpa. None of that happens. So then what happens, right? So in either case, whether it's the child or the older person, it's a complex situation. What the ethics say, well, as humans, you'd say the older person, but it's a really tough decision that hasn't caught up yet with the technology. But a lot of the car companies that have autonomous driving features, their out is have a disclaimer that says you're supposed to be alert, awake, and ready at the steering wheel, even though it drives autonomously. We never really intended it to be truly autonomous. And every single manufacturer has that clause in their product data and their product guides. So then it's the driver, what happened, right? So I don't have a good answer. Yep. Question? Yeah.
The whole selling point is that it's autonomous. That's why you sold.
Yes.
That's how you sold.
Yes.
Sell it with the quality,
Uh-huh.
but we're not.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like, well, it's not a-
It, in a way, seems like it, but you bought the car, and in signing your name on the purchase agreement, you're agreeing to the user guide. And I, as the manufacturer, said, well, you misused it. Now it's on you, right? And I promise you they have that language in there, specifically because they want to cover their butt, right? That's really why. But it's still a tough decision. What do you do, right? It's a really tough decision. And
No, I just was gonna make a comment about the governor, that if he was governor well, I'd be like,
I was just using the example of a quote unquote important person versus a kid. But you know, I mean, when I was learning to drive, I learned if you see a ball roll out into the street, stop because a kid's gonna come out after it. But if a car sees a ball rolling out into the street, it's just a ball. It's not a person, right? So a lot of other pieces of information. Yes, Lynn.
Like one of the referee was riding on the sidewalk,
Mhm.
ran over the corner store, street cat.
Mhm.
And another incident was like another food, robot.
Mhm.
It kept on smashing the bus stop.
Yes.
Smashing. All that
Yes.
was like- Realized, oh, not like, I don't think so. I realized it was breaking glass and bumping.
Yes.
Kept on bouncing back and forth.
Mhm.
But I see like, if you see a moving object, wouldn't they just stop and reevaluate,
Ah.
even if it's an animal or?
Yes. And so the animal side, if you're familiar with New York City, you know about bodega cats, right? But if somebody in Silicon Valley is programming and inputting data to train this autonomous vehicle on what decisions to make, they don't know about bodega cats in Silicon Valley. They don't have bodegas. They don't have bodega cats. Moreover, the platform can only detect what its sensors will pick up. If you're using a camera, it can't, it sees this thing and it sees the stuff through the glass, but it doesn't do a very good job about recognizing that there's glass. I mean, people sometimes bump into glass. That's really, really clean, right? But if you add new sensors to it, like laser scanners and sonars, then you can see the hard surface. And so part of that is not having enough sensors to see different types of things in different environments. And the other has to do with not having enough data examples to make it work. One interesting, funny, and you can, don't believe me, look it up on YouTube. iRobot, well, they since went, Chapter 11, they spent a lot of time investigating how to detect animal poop. Because what was happening, this robot vacuum, it would see animal poop if it's on the floor as waste and try to sweep it up. So it would end up finger painting this thing all over the floor. And so imagine if it was your job at iRobot to work on poop detection, all kinds of poop. I mean, how do you even test that? right? Somewhere they had a lab where somebody had different types of fecal material that they were testing with this thing, right? You have to test it. If you don't test it, it's not going to recognize it. And that was a really important problem. And it was somebody's job to do all that. So to address your point about the bodega cat, now, if you grew up in an urban area, you'd know about bodega cat, right? But if you're in Silicon Valley as an engineer doing all of this work, you have no idea that a bodega cat even exists. And so that just says poor data hygiene, right? Smashing in and running over the bodega cats because you're not expecting to see it. Yeah. It's over now, yes. That's all I had. We're gonna stop there, and if anyone would like to present, now is your opportunity. We can take a break for 10 minutes, and then I don't know who's gonna be our first taker, but we'll have you plug in onto the podium. Let me stop the recording, and remember you're among friends, and we'll just have a go at it.